You are now listening to Out of the Blank.
Welcome to another episode Out of the Blank podcast. Now, his name's hard to pronounce, but we're going to call him G. What's up, G?
Not much, Robbie. How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and what do you do professionally?
I live in middle of nowhere, Canada. It's called Saskatchewan, and the city is called Regina. And so it's like this really small. I mean, comparatively to some other big cities, it's like 220,000 people. And then I actually just got a new job at this marketing company. So we got a bunch of Crown Corps in this province, and I work for one of them that deals a lot with working with small businesses and getting them set up with, you know, some free services, some not free services, but just anything that's going to help them with their advertising.
So it's basically helping small town businesses kind of adapt into the corporate world a little bit.
Yeah, like our we still use the phone book in some capacity, but it's obviously being phased out, like because print is being phased out. But the thing is that that's kind of what used to be prominent is now like the third thing. So let's say you have a small business and I get your stuff on there. It'll go in the phone book, sure, under a free listing, depending on what your service provider is for your phone, like if you have a landline. But then it'll automatically go into an app we have called MySask 411, and then that'll automatically be integrated into Google. So it's kind of, think of it as like it goes to the app, it goes to Google, and we're just throwing it into print because like we've got like thousands of people that live in the outskirts that don't even have service that still use the phone book.
Yeah, I think that with a small business, it's hard. Like a lot of elderly people that own small businesses don't really understand the whole entire captivating world that is technology nowadays. Social media plays a big part in marketing now. The fact that you don't really need to advertise on television or in your local newspaper. If you just get an app and you just pay for, like, let's say you have Instagram, next thing you know, you get an advertisement for whatever you just looked up. It's really captivating more audiences that way too, because you gloss over the ad, but next thing you know, you end up buying the product.
Exactly. Yeah. And it doesn't take too long to get down that road. And it's funny because on the opposite side of things, like I'll have the small business, like on one of my accounts, it's a city of maybe, I don't know, less than 1,000 people. And so for them, it's the opposite. And it's weird. Like there's this weird thing called the curse of knowledge. And they were doing stuff in Stanford about it. And it's essentially just because you know a certain thing, you naturally assume that other people do. And what ends up happening is you have a disconnect because you're talking under different circumstances. And so when I'm talking to somebody from middle of nowhere, Saskatchewan, I'm under the assumption that they know what a smartphone, like that they have smartphones, they have internet, they have all that stuff. And there are actually some places that they don't have smartphones. They don't use the internet at all. And so the marketing has to change. And then I have to try to tell them, it's like, no. Google is super important to you because you're a farmer and you do business all over the place. But just because we know something or a lot of people might know something doesn't mean that everybody knows that same information.
I think definitely like it's about kind of finding your audience in a way too. I think it's what a lot of people try and do with podcasting. They try and monetize. It's the same thing. Like if you're creating food, you try and figure out what audience is going to go after your food. Like if you're going making healthy foods, you're trying to specialize in something. That means you're going to get a different audience than the average population. I feel like a lot of businesses where they go to fail is the kind of the point of not adapting to the way the world works now. It seems like I know too many small town businesses that end up closing because either they try and expand it to another shop and they don't get enough customers, or people go to the mainstream one. It seems like everything nowadays, like if you're going to open up a coffee franchise, you have to have a really banging coffee or something because Starbucks already basically dominates the market.
Yeah, and that's a really good point too. I mean, and it's weird because when you're opening up a place, it is that thing of, first of all, knowing who you're tailoring and understanding that, I guess maybe not understanding, but seeing where you're actually going. Like, so there are some, like in terms of podcasts, there's a lot of niche podcasts. Like the one that I run, I think is relatively niche, even though the topic is very general. And so I'm not really worried about, hitting everybody because I understand that it's niche. And actually, before I got into this new job I had, I was in restaurants for 10 years. Like I got my culinary degree and everything. And a lot of my instructors at school and some of the chefs I work with, that's what they said. It's like, figure out your identity and work on that identity. And people are going to come, but you still have to adapt at that same time. And that's what makes it so complicated.
That's why a lot of chefs have signature recipes, something that they're really, really good at. Because usually, like when you're really, really good at something, it's the fact that you've done it a lot and you probably enjoy doing it. So you're going to create the best aspect and kind of you're going to make sure you give it 100% every time you create it.
Exactly. And also you still have to adapt from that like that level that you've reached. So like you've perfected a pasta dish over and over again. And eventually, like, yeah, you still want to have that, but you still want to springboard off of it. And it's a weird thing because you never know, like when do you start like springboarding too far where your general audience is kind of confused at the route you're going and they cease to understand your focus. And it happens with music a lot. Like you see a lot of bands that before they used to be the best thing ever, and then there's that idea of like, oh no, this band's sold out, right? Even though they've just adapted to something maybe more mainstream. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's terrible, but it's definitely not what the niche market was that they first encompassed before.
I definitely think there's two ways to go with it, especially if you're talking about the music industry. Like it seems like a lot of bands try and create, I guess, another vibe for the older or not older, but the younger generation that's coming up. Like a lot of them are into techno music nowadays. I know the Dirty Heads,
Mhm.
they were originally like hardcore punk, kind of rock, like ska type music, rapping a little bit. It was like this hardcore, like kind of West sound, like West Coast sound. Then they,
Mhm.
at one point, like there was really cool chill reggae. Then it eventually led into like this techno music that was kind of mixed with reggae, but it didn't work too well. Where some older fans like myself were listening to their originals and like, this new shit sucks. But then they ended up finding their niche now where they've connected really both audiences. They bridged reggae with the new techno crowd. So now they're creating the music and it blends perfectly.
And it just took time, right? Like, and yeah, and how much trial and error did that take, and how many albums did they have till they get to this point? Like in that, what was that middle messy ground like? Was that 3 albums, 2 albums?
They were about 2 albums in when they decided to change up the sound. No, actually 3 albums in when they decided to change up the sound. And then when they changed up the sound, they released an album and they lost a lot of their major audience. Everyone started talking trash on them. And then they created another
Mm-hmm.
album after that, but it hooked onto the new crowd. So then the new crowd and then some of the old crowd decided to listen to them. And bam, they connected both audiences to where now they're making popular hits. I mean, they started doing back to their original stuff, but doing it in a newer vibe to where everybody could enjoy.
Yeah, and it's so tricky because I was actually talking to a friend of mine about this in regards to fashion. I know we're kind of jumping like food, music, and fashion and stuff, but it was my barber. So I'm sitting there in his chair and he's like, cutting my hair and doing all that stuff. And we were talking about how, because he's super into fashion and how a lot of smaller fashion markets end up blowing up and losing their core audience that they began with. And it's really comes down to the audience identifying with that piece of fashion, music, food, whatever, art, and it's a tangible representation of who they are. And so we, as people that adopt the art form, whichever one it is, we get so tied into it. And so when it changes or becomes mainstream, it freaks us out because it's almost like we're losing a part of ourselves. Like I'm a huge hip hop head, and there's a lot of like the stuff that's coming out now. Speaking when you mentioned that like techno and all that.
Well, that's not new music. That's all like all music that's coming out now. That's all studiotized. The new rap, what they call it. It's
Mhm.
all studiotized beat. The industry found a decibel frequency that pairs good with our hearing, where it hits number one top charts for a month and then it's off. And they just get a
Mhm.
rapper behind it to say a few things. Back in the day, like an old classic hip hop, like NWA or something, Run DMC, that was all emotion that you were feeling in that shit. But nowadays,
Mhm.
it's like you just have some dude rapping about something, but it's just the beat that's catchy. It gets stuck in your head. And then a month later, no one's singing Old Town Road anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And they're trying to, and what they're speaking to, because a lot of like when I hear it, I don't know what they're talking about. So like I'll look up the lyrics because a good buddy of mine is a huge fan of it. I still don't get it. And a lot of what they're talking about, it doesn't, first of all, it doesn't resonate with me. And maybe because like I'm 31 years old, I don't party, I don't go out, I have no interest in drugs. Like, maybe if this
How
music
can
came
any
out.
how can anybody relate to 50 million bags of cocaine on a table?
Yeah, exactly. And yet Scarface is a great movie.
I was gonna mention that too. Like you have to be Scarface to enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like it just doesn't connect. But I mean, like my buddy always explains it as like it's just kind of like you just play it, and it's just some I get like you mentioned, it's like a decibel. It's a certain way that they equalize all the sounds that it's just appealing to you, and it's just appealing to the masses kind of thing. It's like a frequency that just flows through the whole thing, and they're just instead of selling they're selling a lifestyle, but it's not the same as an NWA, as a Run DMC, as a Beastie Boys or anything like that. Like they're selling something different. It's almost like a series of like, I don't know, Vegas montage videos that you want to live this way and party this way.
It's like being a supermodel. You just want to you only have that brief moment in the spotlight. And then, it doesn't last forever. Like Pam Anderson was everything, everybody talked about, oh, Pam Anderson's so hot. And then she got older and she tried to keep up with her looks and it wasn't working out. Like you only have that. If you base anything off your looks or how you look at a certain age, that's not going to last. That window of time where you're the number one thing is for very, very brief. I remember at one point, everybody was talking about Kate Upton. Now no one even mentions her name anymore.
Dude, that's so right. And it's hard because we as people that are watching it from the outside, we don't get that. And I mean, we might get it to a small degree, but nothing that crazy. Like, and it all boils down to relevance. Like I remember I used to work at a restaurant and there was a lot of older people that would come in at like during lunch, and a lot of the older men were like super crotchety and they just wanted what they wanted and they just didn't want to hear it and they just wanted to complain about shit. And one of my coworkers was like, listen, this guy's 80 years old. His kids, and because she had knew them, she's like, his kids moved out. He hasn't worked for like 15 years. What do you think his level of relevance is in his life, that he's where before he used to be a boss of some company and he used to feel like he had more of a purpose? And maybe he's just, instead of just accepting the fact that my purpose is being a grandfather to my grandkids, he's still trying to keep that level of purpose he had before. And I can understand that could mess with you, right? Even now that I'm getting older, a lot of I used to teach kids Greek dancing because I'm Greek. And so, the young kids, when I'm like bringing up stuff that, was cool in my era or is cool now, like they could give two shits. I'm like, no, you guys have to listen to this. And, you have to, it's the best thing ever and blah, blah, blah. And so even my relevance in those moments ebbs and flows depending on where I'm at. And, it's like, what the heck? I'm like, am I that old? Am I that irrelevant to a generation of kids, let's say?
I think the one easiest thing about growth is it takes time. It's not 100% there right when you want it. But nowadays we're living like this stunted growth lifestyle where everybody's trying to get as much as they possibly can with a short amount of time and not really looking at the long benefit. I mean, how many times do kids nowadays plan goals out? Like in 10 years, I'm going to hit this. In 20 years, I'm going to hit this. That used to be a thing back in the day. Like people used to plan their life out like, oh, I'll get there in this amount of time. Like, work your way up there rather than trying to get to the top as fast as possible, no matter whose neck you step on top of.
Yeah, and that in itself could also be a slippery slope, and it's a weird balance between the two. It's like have your goals, but if you have too many goals and your life is too structured, because that's what it used to be for me for like 5 years, I was like miserable because if it didn't fall within those goals, then in my mind I'm like, oh, I'm failing at everything now. And I see other people that aren't as structured and they feel more free, like to just do whatever but they found that balance, like people older than me that have gone through that gamut and found that balance between structured goal and also that freeing feeling of just like, listen, if this doesn't work out, that's fine. Cause I could have potential to find something else that's better than the goal I initially set because I didn't know where I was going to be when I first set that goal.
I'm telling you, the mind's so fascinating. The fact that you can't be tied down and you can't be able to do whatever you want.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
like
exactly.
we literally live in a system where it's like you can't do whatever you want, so you feel suppressed. But then when you go and do whatever you want, you wish you had rules to follow.
Yeah, it's weird, man. I was in after I got out of the restaurant world, I was in real estate for a while. And so it was like for like 5 years. And that's kind of like you don't necessarily have a boss because you're your own boss and you just go out and do things. And since I was 14 years old, I always had a boss and a structure and things to do, especially when I was working in kitchens, because that is all structure. And then I get out into the real estate world and I'm like, I don't know what to do. I finally eventually found some of it. I just didn't end up liking the job. And so now I'm kind of backtracking into a more structured lifestyle. But this company that I work for is a little bit more freeing. So it seems to be a good balance between those two different career lifestyles. And yeah, it is a trip because you want to generalize everything so you can prepare yourself for everything. And sometimes because, failing sucks and it's scary.
Well, I think that's what makes it so kind of worth wanting to go after, because if anything that's really worth chasing after, if there's not an option to fail, then you're not really truly trying for anything. You know what I mean? I think that you shouldn't look at the failure as something to hold you back, but more of something to kind of, yeah, let's say structure yourself. More like, if you mess up, then look what you messed up on and go back and try it again. Don't give up. That whole concept. I mean, the one motivational poster that I took anything from out of school was Yoda saying, "Do or do not. There is no try."
Definitely. Yeah. And that's a classic.
If you don't make it, then that's fine. You can keep working and trying to get better at it and, end up fixing it. I mean, how many times do people miss or get last in a 5 mile run? The next, they keep training and training and training and come back at it and they win.
Yeah. And really you need that time to fail. Like, cause I know some people that have gone into the self-help world where they're, doing videos and helping a lot of people and being like, no, there's no such thing as failure or whatever. And a lot of that stuff doesn't resonate with me. What does resonate is, or recently what has for sure in the past year or so, is the fact that you need to take responsibility for yourself. So failure does happen. You can look at it as failure, but like any hero story, you have to learn from going out there and fighting the beast and taking a piece of that for yourself to like keep protecting yourself and shielding yourself. But you have to recognize it's okay to recognize, at least in my mind, that you have failed and you might need to take some time to figure out what areas there were. And in my experience, I've always been able to, or at least not always, recently, I've been able to narrow it down to things that I caused, choices that I made. Because before I very much would have blamed a lot of outside sources. It's like, oh, this didn't work out because of this person or this thing or whatever. And a lot of the times, yes, those things come up, but a good chunk of it could just be yourself. And, it sucks blaming yourself because then you got to figure out, well, how do I not do that again?
Yeah, you definitely don't want to put all the blame on yourself, but I think it is important to keep that critical aspect in there, because if you start blaming everybody for your problems or stuff that you don't have, then you're really just not really fixing the problem at all. You're just
Mhm.
blaming somebody when it was your fault all along. I mean, a lot of people, it's very hard for them to kind of take account for their actions. Like, I think a main thing that we messed up is when we started handing out participation trophies. Just for trying, you win. Like, there are no winners and losers.
Mhm.
I'm like, the whole point of having winners and losers was the fact that, like, when you lost, you would work so hard because you didn't want to feel like that again, that you would win the next time. That's what kept people training. If everybody just won all the time and there were no losers or anything, it's not an idea of being a loser, but you needed to feel that loss, because I mean, after you play like a sports game or something and your team loses, you're like, fuck, this doesn't feel good. Like, this is like the worst thing in the world. And then when your team won, you're like, damn, we worked for that. Like, we worked our ass off to get here. And this
Mhm.
is why we're enjoying and feeling like this right now.
Well, and the reality is whether so if you lost in a game and someone said it's okay, there's no winners and losers, what they're doing is they're stunting their ability to deal with the real loss that could potentially come with them in the future.
Stunting the growth, dude. We just talked about it
Stunting
earlier.
the growth. Yeah.
It's what it is, man.
Yeah.
It's People think that's going to create a world of losers and babies. No, but it's going to create a world of people that are comfortable with everything, not having enough, not doing
Hmm.
this, being treated like shit all the time. You have the ability to kind of motivate yourself in any way. Like, if you don't have this, you can work up to get that. You can try steps to do that. If you're not doing this, you can do that anytime you want. A lot of people just get comfortable in this autopilot lifestyle, which I'm guessing is probably why you left the restaurant business, because it was just the same thing over and over again. You really wanted to kind of branch off and do your own thing.
It was kind of like that. I mean, I reached 10 years. I went through all facets of the restaurant life up until, again, that's what led me to go to culinary school. And then I did stuff like the restaurant stuff in the back. And then I got into a business situation with somebody that I knew growing up and with a restaurant there. And so that was kind of like, this sucks. I need to get out of this entirely. It just didn't end up going the way that neither of us wanted. And then I'm like, you know what? There's probably something else out there. And then that's what led me to real estate. And that was kind of like, I don't know what to do. I don't have a degree in anything. I just have a cooking diploma. And a buddy of mine was like, here, try this. It might be okay. And I mean, I hated it for the most part. I was decent at it, but it was a mix of those things, because I went from something super structured to something super chaotic. And now I'm finally been able to get into that middle ground. But I've dealt with failures in the past. So now I'm better equipped to deal with them, instead of, if everything was fine and my parents protected me or whoever, I was always protected, I would have no idea how to maneuver through life now.
Well, they definitely don't say life is a journey for, nothing. They definitely say, I mean, it's definitely for something. I mean, we all have these walks in life, and sometimes, you don't figure your thing out until like the very end. Hopefully you figure it out sooner than later. But me, I don't know what I'm doing. I work at a hotel during the day, man, and I do this and then go to the gym. That's it. I'm hoping one day I find something that like, that is like my everyday job that I don't mind going into, but I feel like I'm okay where I'm at right now. I think I'll stumble across it when I stumble across it. I think a lot of people spend so much of their time trying to get stuff done that they don't really want to be doing. They don't look inside themselves to really reveal what they really truly want to do.
Yeah, and I mean, to expect that out of yourself almost at any age, like especially at to have the expectations. Let's say if you haven't hit 25 yet or whatever, if you're under 25 and you're putting such massive expectations for yourself, that's taking away, at least in my opinion, because I mean, I put a ton on myself when I was that age. That kind of shielded me off from a lot of things that I could have done that may have ultimately been better for me. And that's kind of that I stopped myself from opening up to the idea of the maybes, to just focus on the concrete things and having no idea what I'm capable of doing, what I want to do, where I want to end up, how I want this whole end game to play out, and then now it's, when I look back at it, I'm like, I was a freaking idiot.
Yeah, I think we definitely, as people, put too much weight on our own shoulders. It's nice to just say like F it sometimes, which leads us into your podcast. You like that? You like
Oh
that?
yeah.
You like that segue?
Dude, I've been trying to better my segues with the show, and sometimes it works, but man, it's hard to do. So that was impressive.
You just got to pull up in a segue and be like, this is me segueing into my topic, and then do like a Paul Blart video where you're just rolling around on a segue and post it up on a dating site.
Yeah, there you go. Love it.
So tell me a little bit about your podcast, man. Now, I know you brought it up a little bit earlier, but so it's called The F Word.
Yeah. So, I mean, the name kind of has nothing to do with what we talk about. And so it started with an Instagram account that one of our co-hosts has. His name's Anthony, and he's had one called Entertain Facts. And it was a fact page about movies and stuff like that on Instagram. And at that time, when we started, he had about 45,000 followers. He ended up getting to about 83,000, but then Instagram ended up shutting it down due to copyright. He's still trying to fight it. But anyway, so we took the entertain and the facts, and that's where the F part came out of it. And it's about what it is now is pretty much trying to embody the conversations that me and my brother is on there now, and Anthony have when we're out for a coffee or just hanging out, and just putting it in podcast form. So it's about movies, TV, pop culture, anything that integrates into that, and anything else that we can think of that may have come up week to week.
So, okay. So what are some of the topics that you've talked about where you've really kind of focused in and really kind of found interest in so far? Like you talk about movies, TV, video games, and anything else that you can listen. So what's one thing that you find super interesting that you really get hooked on in a topic?
I like the inner workings of, like, I'm not a sports person, but I look at movies, and so casting directors, writers, producers, and all of that stuff in the way that some of my friends look at their favorite sports teams, you know, and the inner workings and behind the scenes stuff is almost more interesting to me than the actual product itself. And because it is part of the story. So, I mean, we just talked about yesterday how there was an exec or a writer back in the 90s, and they were almost cast Julia Roberts as Harriet Tubman, which is like so crazy to think of. And I was following the story for the week that it was coming out, and nothing happened from it. Just one exec said, "Oh, it's the 90s. We should get Julia Roberts because she's a huge star." And I think she just came off of Erin Brockovich, so she won an Oscar for that, if I remember correctly. And I ended up bringing up the topic because there's a larger there's a larger story behind that, of where we are as a culture now and where it was back then, where somebody would bring up that idea. And so I think that's super interesting to me because, I mean, there's so many stories behind the scenes in Hollywood that we have no idea about, and it speaks to that time. And I'm not a political person, so I really don't care for left, rights, middles, or whatever. I'm just looking for kind of the that middle ground that makes sense in all facets, because I honestly think that there's a lot of conversations right now that are, people talking past each other, and it's all over the place. But anyways, that was one of the things we talked about that I thought was super interesting. And then we ended up talking about, promoting your brand, because I was at a podcast uh, get together. And so there was like 20 people there that all had different podcasts, and they just started a Saskatchewan podcast network here. So it was through that. And I'm terrible at marketing myself, branding, all of that stuff. Like, that's why I like this job, because I'm good at it for other people. And so it was just weird, bunch of podcasters in a room talking about their podcasts, and how, like, it just makes me really uncomfortable to try to promote something, because I'd rather underplay everything instead of oversell.
So you're doing this with friends, right?
Yeah. So Anthony was the guy that had the Instagram account. He brought me in. And then my good friend Nick was originally there, but he had his second kid, so he hasn't been able to. And now my brother's in. So it's me, my brother Vass, and then Anthony.
Okay, so do you guys kind of go after different characters in the show, or you guys just kind of be yourselves? Because I feel like with a lot of podcasts, a lot of people try and play characters that they truly aren't.
No, this is us. And the best compliment I ever had was a friend of mine who's really critical about media himself. He lives like 5-6 hours away, so I only get to see him every once in a while. And he's like, "What's great about yours is that it's actually you talking." And
I
this
know,
guy's known
right?
me for years.
It
And
throws me
that
on
was
blast in front of everybody.
But I mean, like, that's the thing. Like, I told the guys, because in the beginning, if you listen to some of our first episodes, because I think we started in like 2017 or something, it was not us at all. There was no identity there. It was pretty much trying to copy whatever I put together from like 9 or 10 different sources. That did not work. So the show now is actually us. And it's the same conversation I would have with somebody either on their podcast or at a coffee shop or in a basement, or whatever. It's kind of the same. It's consistent throughout the whole thing, because that is us talking about it.
That's awesome though, because I feel like that's what really lets listeners really get into your subjects too. Because when you're truly being yourself, like they feel like they can actually connect. Like how many times you get on there and someone plays a character, next thing you know, you're like, I can't listen to this. This guy just is unrelatable. That's what makes music so unrelatable, is that all these artists think they can play this character, this routine, where it's like, how am I supposed to relate to that? I don't have 600 white Benzes. I don't have 600 yachts.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, you can look at other artists from like the back in the day that are talking about something that's like, oh shit, like I haven't gone through that same thing, but I've been through something similar to that. That's what you gravitate towards.
I definitely think so, man. I think that a lot of people out there just want to take something from somebody, or put somebody on blast or something, or do some type of character routine style thing where it's like you're not getting the authenticity. Like this is what I try and do with my podcast. Just have conversations. It's getting to know one another, like not trying to, affect anything. Just take the time and finally kind of understand some things too. I think that's what audiences kind of relate to a little bit. Have you ever seen a movie where it was like you couldn't tell what it was about from the trailer? It felt like the trailer gave everything but what the concept of the movie was.
Um, there was a movie from Darren Aronofsky that came out a while ago called Mother, and so I went and saw that, and that was back when I was reviewing for YouTube, and I was going to just a bunch of movies. So I saw the trailers for it. I thought I had an idea, and then I watched the movie, and I'm like, this was so outside of what I thought it was going to be. And it wasn't really even that good. It was just much different than what the trailer was showing.
I feel like they do it right sometimes with the trailer, but most of the time, like they show you all the good parts, and then like you don't even need to go see the movie. Like they show you all the good parts in the movie. You're like, wait a minute, I don't even need to see it now. Or you get something that doesn't show you anything about what it's going to be about, and that's what I experienced when I saw the trailer for Bird Box. And I don't know why, but it was on
Oh yeah.
Netflix, and it was showing me the quick little brief, I guess, whatever thing, like when it's about to load, if you want to click it or not. I was like, damn, they really don't tell you what this movie's about, because honestly, I was sitting there hooked after the first 10 minutes. And then for the rest of the movie, I'm like, what's going on? Like, this sucks. My mom's like, it's a story. Would you pay attention? I'm like, no, the best part was the first 10 minutes when people are walking out in front of trucks and shit.
Yeah, it had like a Happening vibe. You ever see
Dude,
The Happening?
yes. Do you love that movie as much as I do? Because a lot of people shit on it.
Well, it's in my list of movies that are just so ridiculous that they're just funny to watch to me. Like it's just so crazy. The acting's just hilarious, but I still get enjoyment out of it.
I think it's a good
So
story,
maybe
though.
I don't know if it's the same. I think the concept was okay. It was good. I just don't think they executed it. Like, just the execution was different, but a lot of it had to do with the fact that, like, I don't know, Mark Wahlberg's got like two different modes, and one of them is, when you see his serious movies and stuff, and he's like straight, and then there's ones like this where he's just a little bit comical, but he's not trying to be comical. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like either he goes like, you trying to move your way into my family type vibe, or he's got the whole like, yeah, like, oh, I'm the fun dad. Oh, haha, I like to joke around, like the movie The Other Guys or something. I'm like, dude, why is it always so severe cases in both scenarios you play an actor?
I think it's because, like, some people can only do so much, with their just the way that their voice is and just the way that they are as a person, that it's when they try to expand it, it's either again comical or it is just straight laced, like one or the other. There's not that many actors and actresses out there that can actually pull off a long range of things where they aren't the same person in each movie.
I think the people you accept them as, like Morgan Freeman, you just got to know that anything you involve Morgan Freeman in has to be played on God, because he doesn't play anybody else, basically.
Yeah, he plays like intelligent people that like are smarter than everybody else. And the good thing for him is that his voice allows him to do that too. Like everything that he says, it's like, yep, that is the most important thing going on right now anywhere.
Dude, I'm talking to someone like that right now. You, G, man, you got this voice that's to you where I just feel like you should be narrating any movie ever.
Yeah, I've done some voiceover work recently in the past couple of years. Um, Now that I've gotten myself microphones for the podcast and stuff, I haven't dove into it too much because there is a skill involved with it, and a lot of it is, I can do a pretty decent dry read of some stuff. Um, but when you get into like some of the websites that I go on to audition for, they'll have directions on there, and it does take some time, and that's kind of where, you know acting is not as easy as it looks, because you have to embody the emotion that's there, remember your lines, remember what you need to do, think of your pauses, and it is very much difficult to do it by yourself. That's why a lot of like the pros, they'll go to an actual studio so they have some direction. But yeah, it's one of those things that I've done some stuff for like local radio and some other things, but I haven't really dove into it too much.
Have you ever thought of like trying to create like a action movie trailer? Just like, have you ever thought of the words that you would say?
I mean, outside of doing the classic like in a world type of thing, not so much. When I was selling houses, I would get so bored at open houses that I would like do trailers for the house itself.
All right, you got to give me
But they'd
an
be like
example.
joking trailers.
You got to give me an example, dude. I got to hear it.
Okay, I'm going to try to find one on my Instagram to give you an idea. Like I found, you could find like sounds all over the place.
I just want to get a soundbite of you saying like, that bag of Funyuns is going to be $2.99.
That bag of Funyuns is going to be $2.99.
Fuck, I'm already buying tickets.
Something like that.
I'm already buying tickets to this. I don't know if that's just the whole movie, if it's a short film. Screw it. I'm all in.
Well, I mean, for $2.99, it's kind of like you have to.
Dude, I'm telling you, man, holy crap. Like, if I was you, I would just start walking around in my everyday life, just like when I go up to the drive-thru or something, be like, let me get a double, or did he want the McChicken? And the woman, I mean, whoever's at the drive-thru is going to bust out laughing.
I do that sometimes for my wife, like randomly narrating things that are going on. Like when I have a really scraggly voice, I got a video when she was like, she was really annoyed with me because I wouldn't stop doing it. But for some reason that day, my voice was so hoarse that I kind of sounded like Optimus Prime. So then I kept just like answering all of her questions as Optimus Prime. And so then I took like a video of me narrating what she's doing in the voice of Optimus Prime. And then at the end of it, telling her that Cybertron needs our help.
Oh, God. My parents work in radio, and my mom's like, you should work on your impressions more. I think you could do it for our radio station, like for ads or something. Because she's heard a couple of my impressions I do jokingly, and she's like, you sound a lot like them. And I'm like, if it's something that like it's a skill, like you practice it enough, you get good at it.
Yeah, and it's like it evolves, right? Like I kind of don't. I haven't done too many impressions. I'm a huge Jim Carrey fan, so when I was a kid, I used to do the Ace Ventura stuff a lot, or the occasional Jack Black. It's kind of, but I haven't practiced them enough. I've got some friends of mine that just naturally are good at voices. Like they've got a certain tone to their normal voice that lends itself on all spectrums. So for me, it's harder to go to higher tones because I'm naturally this bassy. Mm-hmm. So it takes a little bit more effort to do that. But like, what would you say is your like number one impression?
People say I do a really good Christopher Walken.
That's a tough one to do.
Yeah.
Let's hear it.
Oh shit! You throw me right on the spot.
Hey man, you got me there, right?
All right, hang on. Give me a second. It's probably gonna take a second, but it's like I don't know what to do. All these things keep happening to me every day. I go to the store. I have no money to do anything. I see, like, once I start getting into it and I start practicing with it.
That's pretty good, dude.
I'll start narrating my whole life, like, just as Christopher Walken, because once I fall into Christopher Walken, there's no getting out of Christopher Walken. So it's like, I'll be opening up my fridge like, oh my, this is tragic news. We're out of milk. And my mom's like, stop. It's been an hour and a half you've been doing this. And I'm like, I can't. I don't know how to stop.
Well, you know what the hard part about the walk-in is? It's not so much the voice itself, but it's the inflections. So like your impression and a few others that I've heard too that are legitimately good, they actually have the right cadence of inflections, where some people focus on the weird, like the real extreme versions of it. So no, good on you, man. That's a really good walk-in.
I find like to get in his mind space, all you got to do is like, you have to stick on something and then just take a quick jump. Like I never thought I need a companion. Bought a bird. Like just hop the gap to get there. and it creates his dialogue. And like you can do that. Like I remember at one point, my buddy's like he told me I did a really good Owen Wilson at a time, which I completely lost, and I never understood what that meant. Like at one time he's like, do Owen Wilson. I'm like, dude, I haven't done that in like a year, man. I don't even know how to do it anymore. He's like, how do you just forget to do that? And I'm like, I started listening to a bunch of voice actors that were doing impressions, and they all started kind of like, oh, I haven't done that one in like 20 years. I wouldn't be able to do it again. Don't even remember what it was like. And then I realized you have to like listen to their like voices talk. Like if you listen to like Al Pacino, and I know I watched The Godfather recently, so I had to go out after his impression. Like, you treat the Corleones with such disrespect, so much disrespect. You'll be sleeping.
Oh, that sounds like Brando.
Whoever the main guy is in Godfather, I've only seen like bits and pieces of it.
Yeah, that would be. That sounds more like Marlon Brando. He's got more of that, like because of the way that they added cotton balls and stuff in his mouth.
Yeah.
So he was talking a little bit more like this, like kind of like how you were doing it. Al Pacino is funny because you can actually do a better impression of him now because his voice is so it's so characteristic now than it was back when The Godfather came out, because it was like very basic back then.
Can you do an Al Pacino?
I've never tried it before, to be honest. Yeah, I don't know if I could. It's growly.
It's just like, hey, I'm Al Pacino.
Yeah,
it's like you're shouting.
Yeah, kind of. It's like yeah, it's like low. It's like really soft shouting. Like he's really intense, but he just brings it down to just a lower, like just a different register than, and then all of a sudden he just spikes and just yells. And it's like the best. It's so good.
He's like one of those movie trailers. He only goes all the way to the left or all the way to the right. There's no in the middle.
Yeah, and his middle was Godfather 1 and 2, because then when they released Godfather 3, he was like way more growly and way more just, yeah. he was transitioning into what we now know as Al Pacino.
See, when I started focusing more on film and learning a lot like through school about like communication arts, which is like developing film and learning how to like kind of like make your own movies and stuff and videos, I started reenacting scenes from movies like Happy Gilmore and stuff. And once I started learning about camera angles, production, and all the types of techniques that go in with it, I started looking at movies completely differently. And it was weird because I would see like, oh, they should have added a low angle here, would have gave this kind of audience view rather than what they did there. I started looking at the actors, like who was hitting a certain, when you see like Ford versus Ferrari, or you see some movie where you get like a British actor, you watch like say The Walking Dead, for instance. Andrew Lincoln, he's British, but you could not tell that from the show.
Yeah. Like Hugh Laurie in House.
Yeah, like you see all these kind of characteristics that play into a film or a TV show or something, and you realize how much it actually plays in when you start kind of noticing these small little details that everything kind of comes together and adds into something.
Yeah, like we were talking about, have you seen The Mandalorian yet?
I have not.
Like the show on Disney Plus. So it's a very quiet. I would describe it as a very quiet and deliberately quiet story, because there are a lot of moments where it's just focusing on the Mandalorian's face, like the main character's face, which is just a mask. But the messed up thing is, and like it's just this is how cool it is for us as people when we really tap into this. You know what he's feeling just by looking at his face if it's done properly, but also because the camera will say either zoom in or out, and it'll establish motive with the movements of the camera. He doesn't say a lot in the show, but you know exactly what he's doing, and you can see his thought process, and it's a mask. It's so wild.
I see Jim Carrey is one of the most impressive actors in my mind too, because his ability to go full into character. Like I know when he played a couple of movies, a couple of actors on scene would talk about how like he would go full into the role. Like when he did The Grinch, he went full into the role. Like there was no breaking out of character. There was no more, other Jim Carrey. It was him all the way. Some actors like that, like Christian Bale is
Yeah.
another good one. A lot of people don't realize like his weight transformations to play his roles, like getting up to 200 to play Batman, then slimming down to 190 something to play Batman, and then also dropping down, let's say 135 pounds, basically borderline like death to play in The Machinist, and then going up like to one of his roles,
Hmm.
Dick Cheney, where he was like 265. Like for anybody that like cares about their looks at all, like myself, at least when it comes to like being a little bit of body dysmorphic, like that can create that in an actor when they do that to their body, losing so much weight drastically and then gaining so much of it back. Um, there was a scenario, I don't know if you heard, with Ryan Gosling. He was going for a role, but he had to put on like 30 pounds. Like it just had to be 30 pounds, fat, whatever. It had to just be, he had to gain 30
Hmm.
pounds and play this character. And he was
Hmm.
all lined up to get the role. He nailed the interview. And at the last moment, they dropped him and found somebody else. So that was just a waste of time. He has 30 extra pounds on him now that is not going towards anything.
Oh shit.
Right?
Those are tough to like. Those suck. That would really be shitty.
I mean, in a scenario like that, like I don't know if I'd be able to. I would definitely wouldn't be able to do something like that. Like imagine working your ass off to get that. Like Jason Momoa talks about it too, like getting into Aquaman, and then people gave him a lot of flack
Hmm.
for having a dad bod at his birthday vacation. He's like, dude, it was like fucking. It's my birthday weekend. I did it for a film. I can't live my life like restricting myself like that. You wouldn't ever be happy.
Well, and that's why you get a lot of actors like who take on roles that involve a lot of physicality. And then eventually they're like, I just can't keep up with the workout anymore. Like I can't keep doing this over and over. I think Hugh Jackman was one. He also had, I don't know if he still has it, but he got diagnosed with skin cancer, if I remember correctly. But even when it came to Wolverine, he's like, I can't keep doing Wolverine forever. I can't keep eating just chicken and broccoli and working out all the time to maintain my weight level or my how ripped I am, over the course of time, because it does affect your daily life.
Yeah, if you can't go out to eat, you can't have enjoyment because you have to watch your calorie intake and you're pulling out a can of tuna next to people that are enjoying beer and pizza. You're like, oh, this is miserable.
Yeah, I knew some friends of mine that got into bodybuilding pretty religiously, and when I'd ask them about it, they'd tell me like, you know what, it's fun, it's great, I feel great all the time, but then there's days where I feel like absolute garbage. There's some days where like they'll be getting ready for a competition and they're prepping for months for this competition, and
Yeah,
then
you're
the
talking to
only thing they
someone.
want to do is like have a pizza.
You're talking to someone right now who's still doing that. I've been working out every day for 7 years, man. I mean, I haven't missed a day. I go, there's no not going. And my bodybuilding manager even told me, he was like, you're at 3% body fat. There's no need for you to be living your life
Mhm.
like this. He's like, you already know that like people do that. It's called competition status. It's when they go for a competition, they drop and restrict their calories, but you're doing it 24/7 where you're not even enjoying anything anymore. First time I went out to eat in like 6 years was like a month ago. Like there's no going out to eat
Mhm.
anymore. There's just, I make my own meals. I make small meals all the time. Eat it nothing but salads all the time where you end up having to use cereal as croutons and shit. It's not comfortable
Mhm.
because I still get those cravings. If someone brings a pizza around me, I'm like, oh, you son of a bitch. Like you lose a little bit of enjoyment in life when that happens. And it's taking me time mostly because my stress with, why I even started working out in the first place from being bullied and stuff. But I'm all open about it because it's why I have so many people that message me all the time, like, how do I get a body like yours? How do I do this? Like, I have a beer gut and all this stuff. And I'm like, I can give you what worked for me, but you have to commit to yourself to go. I mean, I don't drink alcohol, so I don't have a problem with, not drinking it ever. It just is never something that interests me. And I have people from school that used to, pry into me and stuff and say stuff to me where I was like, all right, I'm done. And they come to me now and ask, hey, I'll pay you if you train me. I'm like, I'll give you the advice for free because when I was first starting out, I wish someone would have just taken the time to help me out. I helped one of my friends lose 60 pounds in a matter of like, I think it was like 2 months. I mean,
Hmm.
it's not difficult. You just got to look at some of the stuff and sometimes ask for that help too. Like he was Italian and he's like, I want to lose weight, man. I'm like, all right, what are you eating? And he's telling me the list of stuff he's eating. It's nothing but pasta, breads, all these major, like not really good things. And he's not an active guy. So I was like, just cut those out a little bit or stick to it like once a week or something, or a small treat or something, and work out a little bit, 30 minutes or something. You don't have to work out, just get out and move. And next thing you know, he was down weight taking selfies of himself. And I love seeing that in people because I realize we have this weird thing about our brains where we can chase down something if we're not really pushed into it, but given the helpful steps. You have to also stay committed to it.
It's the accountability factor too. When I used to, when I was working out a lot more in high school, it was me and three of my friends, and sorry, me and two other guys. And so we were going hard on it all the time, right? The only thing we didn't do was the diet, but we were working on a program called Bigger, Faster, Stronger, and it was all based on lifting bulk, like lifting super heavy. So we needed to eat the calories because we were burning so many. But anyways, because there was a three of us, it worked because we had accountability to each other. So if I wasn't feeling it, it didn't matter because there's two other guys that would force me to be there, and so on and so forth. And I found it very difficult for me just to work out on my own. And so when even out of high school, me and a buddy of mine would go together, and we would always if he didn't feel like it, I'd drag him out. If I didn't feel like it, he would drag me out, and so on and so forth. And it's good to have accountability because some people aren't as mentally strong enough to carry that on their own, and they just need somebody there. I know I'm one of those people. And so it helps me have motivation because I don't like letting people down, even though, I'm easily to let myself down sometimes, but I'd rather not let anybody else down, because at
Yeah.
least for myself, I can deal with it at the end of the day.
See, the accountability thing is also what happens with podcasting. You see a lot of people that start podcasts with friends, and then it's a way of kind of getting together, like as a thought, like just to hang out and come closer together again. Then eventually, because I mean, how many times you get home after a long day and you have to cancel plans because you really don't feel like going anywhere? You just want to curl up in front of Netflix. I know I've experienced that,
Oh man. Yeah.
and I think
Me and my wife do that all the time.
there's a major thing though when podcasting and friendship kind of comes in the group, because then after the first time you create an episode and create another episode, next thing you see is you have listeners, you have people that are relying on you. You're now held accountable, and so that helps you get out of the house. But
Mhm.
you don't, once you're there and you're there, you don't know why you didn't want to go in the first place. It's just getting you out the door is the hardest part, because once you walk into your house and it's been a long day, it's so much easier just to hit the hay.
Big time. Especially if you decide to sit down as your first act. Like you get home, put your bag on the side, and then you sit down on the couch. That's a dangerous spot to be in, especially if you got shit to do, because then you do not want to do them.
That's funny because me and my buddy had plans, and I walk in the door and sit on the couch, and I was waiting for like 10 minutes, and he texts me and he's like, "You still coming?" I'm like, "Yeah, I just got home." He's like, "Are you sitting down right now?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "You're not coming, are you?" I'm like, "Probably not."
Yeah, there's a very high probability that I ain't going anywhere.
He's like, "You sitting down already?" I'm like, "Yeah, probably not going out." And he's like, "Are the sweatpants on?" I'm like, "Just hitting the string on the sweatpants." I'm like, "Yep."
Yeah, man. See, the beauty is now, before when I used to go out all the time, because when we would go and party, like I used to party hard with my friends, and I don't ever look back on those days and be like, oh, I miss them. Those days are left back there, and I'm glad they're there. But I just remember so I forget where I was working at the time, but rushing home to shower, get ready, get my stuff on, and then go out to a club and sit around for hours drinking and listening to whatever music was being played or was playing. Trying to hit on girls or try to whatever, right? And now, just the thought of it tires me out.
I think it's just the way the kind of world works. Like we talking about before, the world seems like it's going in a little bit in a downward spiral. It feels like when you go out there, it's more of a hassle being out there if you don't have something like accountability when it comes to, working at a job. But like if it's just accountability, like having a good time or hanging out with friends or leaving the house to do that, it's like No, it's not. It's not going to happen. Like, you know what I mean? It's just
Hmm.
it's if it's not bringing in income, if it's not something that you have to survive off of, it's just not worth going after anymore. Even though when you leave the house, it's fun. You know, you end up be like, why was I even thinking of not coming out? This is awesome. But I think it's just the way like we choose to be a little bit different in this world. You know, a lot of people nowadays are just like, damn, like I don't want to. We're not giving off, I guess, what you would call a sense of empathy. We're creating more of a negative and kind of draining vibe out, you know, in society today than we used to, or at least, you know, that used to be so known. Now it's so easy to be comfortable at home. Technology has given that to us, where we're going to end up being like Wally, where it's like 600 pounds and the beds are floating for us.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's also it's because it's safer for the most part. Like it feels safer being at home, just watching your own TV and not having to be out there, because most of what you see or read or hear from other people is overtly negative. And so, that's that case of taking that energy that you're finding online and carrying it out into the world. And don't get me wrong, like there's tons of stuff that could happen the second you walk out the door for sure. But there's also that thing of psyching yourself out and then just ultimately ending up, staying at home, being on the couch, doing nothing, because you've almost crippled yourself with the fear that you're finding on your phone or what you read on Twitter or anything like that. And, you know, I, I've never been one to have anxiety. Like I've had moments of anxiety, but I don't have chronic anxiety. Like I've got friends of mine that do. And so I don't really have that positive feedback loop where the thought of something sparks my anxiety and my anxiety stops me from doing things and so on and so forth. Like and I guess one of the books I was reading about anxiety was that it is called a positive feedback loop, where you're reinforcing the anxiety through the thought of it, the ideas, then the symptoms roll up and all that stuff. So it's tough to pinpoint.
I definitely think that with how many times do you see someone just on their phone and it's like, what are you doing? And they're just keep refreshing Instagram or something, or they're on Twitter or they're looking at something. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, are you going to remember this 5 minutes from now? And they're like, probably not. Honestly, I'll sit on my phone and go on Instagram, and then I'll shut my phone off and I'll go right back on it like a minute later and do the same exact thing. Like something new just popped up, even though I'm not taking in any of the information. It's just something to make me look like I'm doing something. My mind's completely somewhere else. It's just gone. It's just in the empty void. It's not even thinking anymore. It's like I'm on autopilot and hooked to the phone.
Yeah, man, and that's another form of a positive feedback loop, right? Like you're constantly going back, and that's why they call social media a drug, because I've never done cocaine before. I know people that have done cocaine, and most of them say that for the most part, it's like a 15-minute high or so, and they keep chasing that all the time. That's why they do it so frequently. Whereas, let's say, if you do weed, it lasts you for an hour or so, depending on what kind of stuff you got. But it's that drug thing where you're constantly feeding into it all the time, and you kind of need it, and then you're itching for it, and you're curious to see what's on Instagram, even though you were just there before, because that high is actually a smaller window. And then once you get off your screen and you kind of look in the outside world, if nothing's going on, you're just going to run back to that space.
I think
And
social
it's a dangerous space.
Well, social media is a worse drug, I feel like, than anything that has been addicting so far. Not on the bodily parts to it, but more on the mental aspect of it. Because it seems like a larger amount of the population, if you took away their phone, they wouldn't know what the fuck to do.
Yeah, it's definitely generational too. Like for me, not having grown up with a phone, like I think my first phone I got was when I was I think I was like 22. Yeah, I think 22 was the first time I had a phone, because there was no real need for it. And it was awesome, but I've gone stretches even now today, which it's a little bit harder than it used to be. So I definitely have conditioned myself to need the phone. But I've gone times where if I go out for a run, like I still have my iPod Classic, and so I'll leave my phone at home and just be completely disconnected. And
Yeah,
it's a pretty interesting feeling. Like it actually made more of an impact than I thought it would.
yeah. I mean, I can relate to that because I think the best part about that is you get that. you get no notifications from anything. I mean, the fact like I'll have my phone
Mhm.
on listening to a podcast at the gym, like Joe Rogan or something, something long, and I'm working out, and the next thing I hear is a boop, boop, like a beep or something. I'm like, what the like? This is my private time. Like this is my do not talk to me hour. And I look on my phone. It's like a text message.
Mhm.
It's like everybody wants to start texting me as soon as I walk in the door. I'm like, look, you had all day to do this. And the next thing I know, like I'll put on like do not disturb or something. That still pops up the notifications. I'm trying to bench press. I look over and see my phone's lighting up like a damn dance floor. I'm like, all right, what's going on now?
Mhm. Yeah, and it's much like a person, like a drug addict would say that, in their mind, they get that craving, and it's like this internal thing that's like, hey, go back to it. Like we're coming down off our high. Let's go get after it again. This one is actually a physical sound that's notifying you to go back. So it's a same exact, at least in my mind, it seems like the same exact sequence of events of someone in their mind being like their mind telling them that they want this drug and to go back to it. And in this case, it's just all those notifications that pop up, and they make you look, and they make you, once you look, then most of the time it's very quick that you're going to, not look at it. You're going to go look at it. And especially if it's something from a social media versus an actual message from somebody, too, because I found that out recently.
I'm actually
If,
like looking at my phone. It's like a drug dealer. I mean, the fact is, you have all these things on there, so many options to choose from. It's like the dude opens up his jacket. He's got everything like the Dare program, basically.
mhm. Yeah. And all you got to do is pick and choose which one you want to go with.
I'm
It's
telling you,
the dark trench coat in the alley.
it's something because, like, I mean, speaking of Scarface, have you ever seen cocaine before?
Yeah, I was in LA at a big rave there, and somebody had just brought it out in the middle of a crowd and was asking people if they wanted to buy it.
They act
So
like that
I've never
shit.
actually seen.
They act like that shit is so normal. When you start getting hooked on something, they act it's so normal. The first time I ever experienced it, I met this guy. I known him probably a week, maybe. And I walk in, he's got a giant bag of cocaine sitting on his table, and him and his buddy are just doing line after line. I'm not going to throw him under the bus. I won't give out his name, but
Yeah, yeah,
I
no.
was like, okay, this is something I've never experienced before. I'm 17 years old, like, holy shit. And he was like, you want a line? I'm like, I'm good. I have ADHD. I'm all right, man. I'm pretty hyped up as it is. Thank you. Though I'm not going to accept your
Yeah,
offer now, but maybe down the road. Like, I don't know how you turn down someone for Coke in the proper way. So I was trying to be respectful. And he was like, all right, yeah, we're just going to go down the street. If you can you watch my house? And I'll be gone for like probably like an hour or so. I'm like, what? So he leaves me at his house with his puppy bloodhound dog, and he's the coolest guy. I still talk to him now. We're cool and everything, and but like, dude, it was so freaky. I was like, wait, you're leaving me at your house, and you just met me, kind of. So it's like you don't really know me, and you're gonna leave me with all this stuff. He goes, yeah, there's stuff there if you want it. There's stuff over there if you want it, but I'll be back in like an hour. And if anybody answers the door or anybody knocks on the door, don't answer. Okay, just stay quiet. I was like, all right. So I'm like sitting in his house, like completely thinking this is normal. I just sit on the couch, turn on his Xbox, watch a little bit of like Netflix or something with cocaine sitting on the middle of the table and his bloodhound laying in my lap. I'm like, I don't understand what's happening right now. And I don't know what decision I made to get me to this point, but this is strange.
yeah. That's I can't say I've ever been in anything like that before.
I'm just saying the idea though behind it is that how it's so normal. Like you're talking about LA and someone just rips it out and starts asking people if they want some. That's how phones have become now. I mean, phones are like, we're all numb to everything. It's just there for us. So it's like a normal thing. If someone's on their phone while they're driving, it's like, oh, that's just another person just being an asshole. It's like, but you don't really truly address it. You let it go like, oh, that's what everybody does. I mean, how many times do you check your phone while you're driving?
Yeah, well, I don't, because I just now they've increased the rules. So if they catch you once distracted driving, it's a $580 ticket.
Oh,
And so
fuck
they've
that.
got yeah, man, it's like nine new rules they just released last week, and it starts at $580. And I'm like, all right, get fucked. Like, come on. This is so. I mean, for a while, I've just kind of put it in my pocket because I can't afford a ticket. just in general, like I can't afford a ticket. And also for something like that. So yeah, but I mean, I still see people do it. And for me, it's just like, man, kind of, that's going to start eating away at your wallet the more they catch you. Your second fine. So if they catch you, they give you your first ticket of 80 or $580. If they catch you again, it's $1,400.
Damn.
Like $1,400 for a second distracting driving ticket. And I don't remember if it's second that day, because like the police have gone up to say like we've caught the same person 3 times in a day, on like within 2 hours of it. But I'm like, come on, like that's ridiculous. I mean, and that being said, I've never lost anybody to distracted driving. So whoever's listening to this that has, I apologize. But on my end, it seems extreme. However, on the other side of it, to somebody that's something that has completely ruined their lives, like somebody distracted driving to, injure a family member or hurt somebody or kill somebody or anything like that. Like I have no choice but to see it from that side as well.
I definitely think like there's one time I almost got into a car accident because I was stopped at a light and I was looking up in my rear view and I see this car going really fucking fast. And I'm like, this person's going to apply their brakes. No, he kept going. And I mean, he's probably a good 30 something feet or 40 something feet away from me. I can't judge distance that well, but they were hopping up on me and they were not slowing down to the point where they should be. They're going 55 and they should be only going probably 20, at least slowly coming to a stop. And I see it in my review. I'm like, they're looking down at their phone right now. And I literally just moved over a little bit, like cut the car diagonal. He just missed my Kia Soul, went right through the red light, didn't even know it happened.
Mm-hmm.
That was
fucking scary, man.
That was something I was like, Jesus, like we're not paying attention that much anymore. So actually I spent more time, mostly when my phone broke. It was like a few months back. I had my phone broken for 2 days. I didn't have one. And I learned that like every morning I was waking up, I was looking for my phone to check. And I was like, this is a bad habit I need to break. So now when I go into grocery stores, when I spend way less time on it now, I'm not trying to be addicted to it anymore. So I realized like how negative it was impactful. When you're checking it, you're missing out on conversation. You're missing out on so many things. When I go into a podcast, the thing's on silent and it's in a completely like all the way against the wall or something. Like I don't have it anywhere near me, so I can't have that little demon in my pocket. I mean, when you walk into the grocery store and that phone's in your pocket, that trip to the grocery store goes from 20 minutes to like an hour.
Well, not only that, there's an actual state of hypnosis that you get into where like, and you'll see this when you're driving too, like you're driving, let's say both hands are on the wheel and you're just paying attention to the road. And there's a state of it where you've, let's say, gone down the same road 100 times and you'll actually blank out. And if you try to remember what the last 10 seconds of your drive was, like even if you would have stopped at the lights, all the stop signs and everything like that, you could find that you'll blank out and be like, I actually don't remember how I got here, because you get into that state, especially with repetition. So then not only could the other side of maybe being on your, a grocery trip that's going to take you an hour because you're in the frozen food section checking Instagram, but there's the other one where it's like, next thing you know, you can't even remember 10 minutes of your life because you're just kind of moving around like a zombie with your phone. And then you kind of get up to realize that's like, oh shit, like what happened to the last 10, 15, 20 minutes?
Yeah, it feels like bits and pieces of your life go away. And I started hearing like my parents say when I was a kid, like enjoy your moments now because when you get older, time seems like it just flies right by. And like now I'm getting older and I'm noticing like, holy shit, the month is almost over. It's about to be a whole new year.
Yeah, man. It's like I said, I'm 31 right now, and I'm starting to notice that, like even because most of my friends have kids, and now their kids are like 3, 4 years old, and it seems like it was literally yesterday that they all just had their kids. You know what I mean? Like, and now they're all like 3, 4, 5. Some of them are going to school now, and it's just that's a trip. Like that's a real trip right now, and like me and my wife don't have kids yet, but I can only imagine what it's like. Because when I ask my friends, they're like, I don't even remember when these kids reached 2 and 3 years old. It's just they've decided to, come out of the womb and now they're 4
Dude,
because so much time.
I'm 10 years behind you, but there are literally all my friends, everyone's either getting married, they're like college degrees, they're getting, I already got my associates, but they're getting like their bachelors, they're getting all these things done. They're getting married. Some of them already have kids. They're like 1 or 2. And I'm sitting here like, damn, my biggest problem is, do I want Raisin Bran for breakfast or do I want Cinnamon Toast Crunch?
Hey man, that's a good way to do it though. Cause like I've known some people too, like right out of high school, they just rush to get their lives done. And I'm not saying that people that, get married young and have kids young and stuff like that's the case, but like I didn't, I got married when I was 30. So I've only been married about a year and a bit. And when I was younger, I remember those moments now more because they seem to be longer. And I mean, we also didn't have the same phones that we have now. So when you were out, you were out. There was nothing there to distract you. Like you were just with the person there. So those periods of time ended up being like they expanded longer and longer because there's no reason for you to check your phone, and the other person has no reason to check their phone, and so those moments just end up lasting longer.
Yeah, it seems like that can be kind of intimidating too when it comes to like where you're supposed to be in life. Like, I mean, people, oh, I'm doing this comfortable. I mean, not switching off from the phone thing, but having kids, like, you're talking about too,
No.
being in your 30s, people are getting married. It's like I'm sitting here like, my problems are so minuscule compared to them being like, oh, I got to feed my kid, I got to do these types of things. I can't hang out because I have to do this. And I'm sitting there like fucking walking around naked, narrating my life as Christopher Walken, like, oh, the heat is not turned up in the house at all. Kind of cold down there. And I'm like, that's my like thing going on in my life. And everybody else is like, oh yeah, we're trying to get a house. I'm like, fuck, did everyone age too fast? Like, is the world like we just lost, I guess, a bit of ourselves along the way? It seems like everybody wants to have it now rather than having it later.
Well, I mean, the thing with having it now is that it's now, like the thing of just getting something right away. Like there's a test that they do with kids, and it's kind of a test to see if they're going to be sociopaths in a way, and it's the marshmallow test. And so they put a marshmallow in front of a kid, and then they tell the kid, if you don't touch this for 10 minutes, you'll get a second one. And then if you don't touch that one for 20 minutes or 10 minutes or so, something along those lines. Like I don't know it down pat, but anyways, it's withholding something right away for something better along the way. And sometimes it's really hard to know. So in some cases, you take the thing that's right in front of you because it's there. It exists right there. The interesting concept behind the potential, like if someone's like, oh, you've got a lot of potential, potential doesn't exist. It could potentially be, and I'm saying potential right now, it could be out there waiting, but it could be 5-10 years. It doesn't actually exist yet. It's something you're moving towards. So the idea of waiting for something is really tough because, well, I've got this right now. It's right here. That's where a phone, drugs, alcohol, all of that stuff plays in because it's right there right now. And you don't have to wait for anything. You don't have to wait for your life to get better because if you take this drug, you will feel like your life is better.
I'm telling you that, like, wanting the immediate result for people, they just can't see the long term things. I mean, I'm at fault for doing it myself too. If you told me like you can get a punch in the face right now, or 3 punches over a lifetime, what would you take? And I'm like, I'll just take the punch right now. You know what I mean? But also in the more kind of realistic aspect, like if I can give you $1 million right now, or if you wait 2 years, I can give you $200 million. Nobody's waiting 2 years.
Yeah, for the most part, they'll take it now. That's the thing behind the lottery too. Like if you win the lottery, there's some out there that are like, they'll pay you over the course of like 10, 15 years or a lifetime or something. So then the question is, do you take all of it now or do you take it, year to year? You take less of the money of the overall total year over year. And I mean, at one person, like a financial analyst could say, oh, like you take it I don't know, year after year, because you know you've always got something no matter what every year. Or some other guy, analyst, will say, nope, take it all at once and start investing it into stuff so that you can grow it because you'll have a giant lump sum.
Yeah, I think it's all about.
But there's a book I'm reading. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, what book are you reading?
Well, there's a book I'm reading called 12 Rules for Life from Dr. Jordan Peterson. And one of the chapters that he has in there is do what is meaningful, not what is expedient. And like that, the book itself has been a huge game changer for me. But like even just that chapter pertains to exactly what we're talking about, is that do something that is actually going to be meaningful for you instead of the thing that's going to be expedient right away, because that's not going to, that thing that's expedient is not necessarily going to do you any good.
That's not where happiness lies. I think happiness can be earned in a longer term. Like, it's not just building a house. You don't just want to rush it and create a crappy piece of, whatever. You want to be able to build it out and have a foundation and, plant all these things that's going to make it last rather than just be there for a brief amount of time. I think more people need to look at things as the long-term answer, not the short-term fix.
Yeah, it's hard though, because that long-term answer is constantly evolving. Like I thought my long-term answer was going to culinary school. Turns out that wasn't it. Then I thought it was going to be real estate. That wasn't it. Then I thought it was going to be, the other job I had before I got my current one. And it is constantly evolving. And sometimes it feels like for a while I felt like I was free falling because I didn't know exactly where I was going to where I was going to end up. And so it's a scary thing because your future is this void that exists. And a lot of people pick, going back to the idea of speeding up to get through things because that's what you're supposed to do. Like, oh, you're supposed to get married, have kids, do this, do that, or whatever. Because at least that maps out something and there's some structure to it.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the same time, it's really hard to judge it because it may not end up being good for somebody, and you never know until you actually reach that point. Like everyone's like, oh, how's marriage going? I'm like, well, if I want to be a dick about it, I can't really answer that until I'm on my deathbed and I can look at the entire thing, or how's your life been? Don't know. When I'm sitting there and I'm about to go, and then I can look back at everything and I could be like, you know what? It wasn't so bad. Or I can say it was crap. Or I can say, oh, it was great. Like realistically, it's hard to judge because you're constantly evolving with your current state of being, and I'm not a holistic person. I'm not a universe type of person or whatever. I'm more of the thing of, happiness is an interesting thing. Like I don't focus on happiness. I am trying to focus on meaning. And in a lot of what Dr. Peterson writes in his book, it's that life is chaos. And so you want to stave off as much chaos as possible. And the more you can stop the chaos or the flood from coming in, the better off you'll be in the long run. But you won't know that until you actually have to face it. So you have to prep for the flood, go through the flood, and then hopefully be better equipped for the next flood to come. And so you're in this constant state of preparation for something because life is chaotic and life is suffering, and that life, like everything is real because we all deal with suffering in one form or another.
You need to be like a hostage negotiator. With that voice, you could talk down and rationalize anybody.
Yeah. Excuse me, sir. Do not jump off that ledge.
I would do whatever you say. Be like, yes, sir. I don't know what I was thinking. I'm in a terrible position. There's no bushes at all. Yeah. I don't even know what I'd be aiming for.
Aim for the bushes. See, that's another Other Guys reference. I love that movie, by the way.
That's why I dropped it in there.
I actually
caught it.
Yeah, man. Okay, I'll tell you this, and it's controversial with a lot of my friends. I actually prefer the Other Guys over Step Brothers. I'm putting that out there right now. I don't know why, but for some, I think Step Brothers is hilarious, but the Other Guys is I don't know. It hits on certain levels. I can't even explain what they are, but I just like it better. And we're talking like 1% better because they're both just awesome movies.
I can see where you're coming from with it, but I was the type of guy that have seen Step Brothers probably 80 million times because he's too lazy to change the DVD out of the DVD player. And I actually got so stoned, I watched the director's commentary of it. And in the director's
Yep.
commentary, they're commenting on the movie and they don't even talk about the movie. They had like random basketball stars walk into the thing and they started chatting them up and they're all talking about like what they're doing in their life at the moment. They're bringing up stories of their childhood and stuff and they're talking like they and then they keep trying to go back to the film. Dude, that movie is probably 2 hours long. When I was so stoned, it felt like it was like 6 hours long. And that whole entire thing when they were talking, I was tripping the whole time. I could not stop laughing, and it made me enjoy that
That's
movie
awesome.
even more.
Yeah, man. Well, and it's because you retroactively created a memory around that movie. I remember I used to buy, like, I still to this day buy CDs. And a lot of my friends are like, why the hell do you buy CDs? I'm like, I don't know. It sounds better in my car than plugging my phone in. Like, just the way that my car is when I want to hear something, like, I'll like really, really hear something. If it's a new album that's out, I'll buy the CD, especially if it's an artist I like, and then I'll listen to it. But, anyways, like right now, in when you talk about, expedience and things moving so fast, the state of the music industry, for instance, is that things are coming and going so quickly. You don't have time to establish any memories around anything. Like I remember Kanye West College Dropout coming out, and Late Registration came out on my birthday. I remember it came out, I think it was like my 16th birthday or something like that. And I listened to that album front to back for weeks because there was nothing else to listen to. And I remember I had two spares between, I had my first period, then second and third period up until lunch. I didn't have a class. And so me and my buddy would always go play like squash or go to the mall or hang out or whatever. And that CD was on loop. So every time I listened to that CD, there is a giant block, like a giant memory cloud that exists whenever I think about it. And it's one of those things that I'll never forget because there was so much time where that album encompassed my life. And now a lot of the songs, like I don't listen to half the stuff that's coming out because the second you get introduced to a song or an album, there's another one tomorrow and the next day and the next day.
And they all sound the exact same. I mean, having a CD is better than listening to music on your phone. For one thing I can think of in general, fucking advertisements. I don't. Before
Yeah.
it was like you could skip them after 5 seconds. Now they don't even give you that. They give you two advertisements in the beginning, and after the first 20-second one's done, they load you up with a 4-minute one where you're like, I can't even skip this. Like, what's the point of even listening? Like, it totally discredits the artist at that point. You're like, I don't even want to listen to the song anymore.
What are you listening it on? I listen to my stuff on Google Play, so at least I can get the album, and the album is just by itself. Like I stopped listening to stuff on YouTube a long time ago for that exact reason.
I'm on YouTube, and I'm telling you, I'll be load up a podcast. Oh, new podcast episode. Let me listen to some Joe Rogan or something. Next thing I know, it's like you have two ads. This is the first one. It's 10 seconds long. I'm like, all right, cool, and then I can skip the next one. Nope, they loaded me in for a 4-minute ad on Toyotas. I was like, you son of a bitch.
Yeah, it's really bad. It's funny how YouTube now is turning into like the new cable, where it's like you've got commercials happening all the time. So like then you're just like fed up and you don't want to go through it, and you're just like going to the next video.
This isn't Nam. There are rules that we need to follow as people. I should not be getting a 4-minute advertisement on trucks when I own a car that barely runs. Thank you.
Well, and you know what the interesting thing about it though is that like we have ourselves to blame because not ourselves, but like us as people, because of that ad, let's say they're going to see that X amount of people viewed that ad on Joe Rogan's podcast, for instance. And it's just going to reinforce that. Like it's the same thing with why do they keep making sequels and keep recycling the same thing over and over? It's because we're rushing out to the theater to watch them. And it's not until everybody as a collective, like if everybody in the planet just stopped watching YouTube and uploading it on the sole purpose of the fact that they hate that there's so much advertising, then you're just going to see advertisers pulling out.
You're gonna
they
buy,
need it to keep YouTube going.
Well, you're gonna buy whether it's good or not. You're just going to buy it just to buy it. Like I've run across few advertisements or few YouTube videos that don't have advertisements only because they say a certain thing where they can't be monetized for an advertisement. And it's like,
Yep.
it changes, man. We're going to live in a system where there's like, screw it. They're going to buy it anyway. So might as well just give it.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting to a lot of it where it's just like, well, this machine's been being built over time. It started off as a little gear, and then they kept adding gears to it. Let's say 30 years ago, or 20 years ago, or whatever, and now it's just this giant moving machine that's trudging across the earth, and we can't stop it. And so you'll have phases of your life when you're wanting to fight, and then there's the ones that you're just like, you know what, this is just the way that it is, and you just learn to accept it. It's like a band I remember when I was younger. They're called Thrice, and then they just released an album, I would say about 4 years ago. And what that album that came out 4 years ago sounded like versus the one I bought when I was 14 years old, 14 or 15. This was before College Dropout. It's like two different bands. It's like the one back then wanted to fight, and then these guys are like, we're older and we've lived life, and this is what it actually is versus what we were talking about. It was just a very toned down version of what they were, but it was much more introspective because they understood the machine that they were feeding into and part of the machine that they had become.
Yeah, man, telling you, sometimes we just got to say, you know what I'm about to say. Sometimes we just got to say the F word. That was a awesome fuck. Come on. Give me some credit on that one.
That was really good. Hey man, anytime there's a plug, it's an awesome one.
I know, right? Except unless you have a fork and it goes towards an outlet, like much of my youth.
Yeah, but when's the last time you did that?
Like a month ago.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, hopefully
I don't like to learn.
If 2 months go by since you do it.
I don't like to learn from my mistakes.
See, that is one thing I would say is a little bit of a problem. That's all I would say, is that maybe you just have to learn from some of your smaller mistakes, or, just do whatever you want on the other side, and to make those little mistakes seem innocuous. That's what I did for years.
Well, look,
it's like, you might think that's bad, but this is either worse or way better. So I'm good with this.
I tell you the same thing I told my parents when I was a kid, and I did it. I told them, I said, hey, if it looks like it fits in there, why wouldn't it fit in there? And they said, you're going to figure it out. And I figured it out, but I'm going to still keep figuring it out, I guess, every single day. You don't shape a fork like a fucking electrical socket. I'm just sorry. You don't do that, because a kid's going to stick it in there.
That's true. But I mean, also, you have to think of, okay, so they're shaped similar, or it looks like it would go in there, right? Then you got to ask the question. The next level is, why would it, or why wouldn't it? And I think in those moments are when you really, break it down further, and you realize the kind of the truth behind the fork and the outlet, because then you find out, it's like, oh, I know that it does fit in there, but why does it fit in there, and does it matter, and should it? And then you start breaking it down more and more and more until you realize, hey, I don't think this is supposed to go in here.
This is why you need to talk to people, G, because I've never met a 7-year-old that would ever have that type of critical thinking. But that's probably where we differ.
Hey, man, I'm talking to you.
That'd be funny though. Like, you're just talking to a 7-year-old. I want you to critical think this. It might fit in there, but what's it going to happen if it does fit in there? What would it do if it did? And the kid's just like, this is why we test things, and fucking just jabs it. That's me when I'm coming from that age. I blew out the power in our whole house doing that.
Oh, fuck. Yeah, that's legit. Don't want to do that. See, that alone should be like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't do this, because now we don't have power.
I did that with a knife and a toaster too.
Yeah, that one's...
that's not my fault,
I don't
though.
know which one's worse.
That one I can rationalize, because my toast, it like broke in the thing broke so it wouldn't pop out. So it was burning, and I thought it was going to start a fire. That. Yeah. So instead of unplugging it first, I just thought, hey, I could quick operation this out of the toaster. And it wasn't very good.
You touched the sides.
Yeah. It made
you touched the sides. It's dangerous.
It didn't explode. It just made a really loud pop, and then I dropped the knife, and it fell off the counter. So that was, I guess, a good thing. But those moments I've experienced in my life where I'm just going to want to sit and watch my own kid if I have one, just experience it. Like, hey, Dad, I'm going to do this. I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit with popcorn and watch you do this because it's going to be funny.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think you're supposed to, like, when I talk to my friends' kids, like, and most of them are in that, like, they're talking, they understand some things. I'll talk to them like I'll talk to anybody else. Like, I'll try to talk as normally to them, and their parents always look at me like I'm weird, and the kid looks at me like I'm weird. But they actually make for really funny conversations because, kids are a little bit smarter than we give them credit for, at least that I used to give them credit for. And so when I'm talking to my goddaughter and I'm like asking her to rationalize what she's doing, it's really funny. And in a way, she kind of gets what's going on a lot more than we first thought. And it's just, yeah, I think it's just hilarious.
They're a lot more adaptive than critical thinkers, I think. I think when you get older, you start to become less adaptive to stuff. And when you're a kid, you're like a ball of Play-Doh. Like you're just filling up every single little bit of information as much as possible.
Well, like in Step Brothers, when he said, he's like, I forgot how to be a dinosaur. He was saying, like, I used to run around the house as a dinosaur, and I can't do it anymore. So as you lose your innocence to whatever, and you look at, young kids that are just open to all the maybes in the world, like open to the possibility that a unicorn and a leprechaun can have a battle on the street and play that out in their mind because they don't have to worry about anything else. It's a pretty amazing thing because in those moments, at least in my experience, I've been able to kind of find I guess I could say my innocence as when I was a kid. When I was more adventurous, when I wasn't so worried about what other people thought, when I wasn't really as critical of myself as I turned out to be, and then just be. And
Don't lose
I
your
think
dinosaur.
yeah, don't lose your dinosaur. I mean, it's it's a funny concept. It's an interesting concept, and I think it's something that we all need from time to time because there's so many other things that are stopping us from doing that. There's all the quote unquote rules or things we're supposed to do, I think, that have stopped us or have put up blockades. It's the reason why a voice actor hasn't done his Christopher Walken accent in a long time because he's so worried about other things, or because you forget. And if you don't continuously train, you're gonna forget. If you don't, go to the gym, you won't be able to lift what you lifted that day. And that's the ever growing and ever adaptive nature of us. And yet we still have to remember kind of the simplistic foundation that we came from sometimes, just to level ourselves off, not necessarily ground ourselves, but just to level off because a lot of things are pulling you apart, right? A lot of instances in life end up pulling you one way or another, and then you feel like you're out of sorts because pieces of you are scattered all over the place and it's not in one cohesive unit.
Damn it, G. You just brought a new light to Step Brothers.
Yeah, man, that's what happens when you start analyzing film, dude. You just said it. Like when you start noticing that, the camera angles are actually have meaning, or they should do this versus that, what one thing means versus another. That's what happens. That's why I love film so much, because it actually, like, I don't know. I've watched Fight Club is one of my favorite movies of all time. And I've seen that movie in almost every single phase of my life, no matter what's happened. And I see that movie differently every single time, especially last year when I rewatched it, when like a bunch of shit was going on in my life, because they were 30 in that movie. Edward Norton's like, we're 30-year-old like men dressed as boys or boys dressed as men or whatever he said in there. And I'm like, oh shit, I'm 30 now. I've been in corporate world. I've been this, I've been that. So you one movie over the course of your life, if it has enough substance to it, will end up evolving as you evolve, and you'll see different parts of it.
It all comes full circle. And you said it best, man. It's a better thing to end on, dude. I appreciate you doing the podcast, man. This has been awesome. I'm telling you, there's
Oh
nothing
man,
like
thank you so much for having me.
It's like you got a voice like Morgan Freeman. You got to capture that. I'm telling you, make an audio tape for people that have trouble sleeping. Because if you just narrated something, I guarantee you could just easily soothe someone away.
Well, if anyone out there is listening that needs some voiceover work, then they can just let me know.
Well, I want to give you here a second at the end to drop your podcast. See if you can do it better than I can. Just give your links to where people can find you.
Sure. So you can find the F Word podcast almost everywhere, 11 different outlets from Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Breaker, Anchor, all those places. You can always find it on our Facebook page at the F Word Podcast, also on Instagram at the F Word Podcast. And you can also email at the F Word Podcast at gmail.com. So any of those ones, you'll be able to find our show. And if you go to YouTube at the F Word Podcast, you can see some of my past reviews of shows, a lot of Netflix foreign stuff, but you can also just get an audio version of the most current podcast, always dropping Saturdays at 1 p.m.
Well, take us out, G. Come on, give us a good outro.
A good outro.
I want an action thriller outro.
And this was another episode of Out of the Blank with G and Robbie. And both of these gentlemen are out.